Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. We got a nice little webcam. We got a fancy little lavalier mic. We got a green screen. We got a lighting kit. We're kicking off the 2018 season in style, reinvesting into the production budget now that we hit 100,000 subscribers. So we're doing kind of this whole setup when we're just doing kind of chat episodes, when we just want to talk a little bit of ball, maybe go over a certain topic. And today what we're talking about is my fantasy running back rankings from last week. So we're going to have a little conversation about that. In particular, maybe some of my more controversial rankings that a lot of people were asking me about. Again, a lot of you have already seen these rankings because I did post them last week, but there's only 100, there's actually now 1,000 patrons on the Patreon and 110,000 subscribers. So the ratio of people who have seen these to not see these is very high. I won't be updating this on the channel every single week, but I will be updating my fantasy rankings every week on the Patreon. So if you want up-to-date stuff after we get injuries and after we see preseason tape and training camp and all that kind of stuff, if you want to see the most recent and freshest rankings every single week, anybody who gives to the Patreon, it can be $10, $5, $1, whatever your financial situation is, any amount of money is totally cool because you're supporting the channel and you're helping me do this for a living. So regardless of whatever you guys give, any patrons will get access to all those updated rankings on a weekly basis. But with that all being said, let's go over the initial ones that I posted last week, starting with the running backs. Round one, it's fairly easy to talk about. I've done episodes, like individual breakdowns on literally every running back in this tier, except for David Johnson. I've done Bell, I've done Gurley, I've done Zeke, I've done Fournette, I've done Kamara, I've done Barkley, I've done Dalvin twice. Melvin Gordon was the first episode I ever did back when the production value was total ass. So that was like 3 years ago. I think he was still at Wisconsin. Yeah, it was before he was even drafted. But I have broken down all of these guys and given my thoughts at one point or another. I love all of them. You really can't go wrong. It's just a matter of how far or how high in the round you're picking. So I'm not going to expand too much on those. Round two, that's where it gets a little bit interesting to me, maybe a little bit more off the beaten track. I know a lot of people think Devonta Freeman's a round one kind of guy just because he's been so productive in his career when he's healthy, but that is the key word for me, which is health. That's why I have him at the very top of round two instead of round one, because for as much as I love him on tape because he runs just so damn hard on every single snap, because he runs so hard, I'm not 100% confident he'll be able to make it through the whole season. The concussions worry me a little bit. When he's on the field, I think he's fantastic. I think he's a guy who can go off on any given week and win you a game or win you a whole week. But, with Tevin Coleman there kind of stealing snaps and with the fact that you don't know if he's going to be fully healthy for the season, it's hard for me to pull the trigger in those first 12 to 14 picks. So I think round two, at the very top of round two, is a very comfortable position for him. Whether you go running back in the very back of round one and you want to double up at the position, or maybe you're going like DeAndre Hopkins at the end of round one and you want to grab that running back at the turn, I think he's a great pick either way, no matter what you're doing. Right behind him, I have Jerrick McKinnon, who may be a little bit tougher to project because, he's going to a new team, a new offense, new coordinator, all that kind of stuff. But just from a pure talent perspective, I think he's a gifted athlete at the position. He can pass protect, he can receive, he can run outside, he can run inside. Obviously he's a better outside runner than an inside runner just because he's so damn fast. But with his kind of, put your foot in the ground, make one cut and get upfield skill set, it really fits very well with what they like to do in San Francisco with the zone run game. He's got the speed to press the edge. He's got the agility to cut back, do those really, really hard cutbacks like you see LeSean, McCoy, and Arian Foster do. And, obviously because Kyle Shanahan likes to throw to his running backs, he's a great fit there as well. I think going into the offseason, I kind of expected the Niners to trade for Tevin Coleman, but I think signing Jerrick McKinnon was like the next best thing they could do because their skill sets are very similar. So I'm very high on McKinnon. I think he's going to have a great year in San Francisco as long as he stays healthy. And I think in PPR, which these rankings are for PPR leagues, he's going to be a monster. Right after that, I got Jordan Howard, who, when the Bears drafted James Daniels, who was a center out of Iowa, when they drafted him in the second round, they got him playing guard now, I believe. That, to me, improved Howard's value by literally a full round. I think Daniels is a fantastic zone blocker, which for the system they're running, I call it spread coast. I can't remember who coined that term, but I love it, and I think it perfectly kind of encapsulates what they are. The spread coast system, it's a lot of inside zone, some outside zone, but mostly inside zone. And if you want to run inside zone, you need guards and centers that can reach block, and that's exactly what Daniels can do. So I think that interior three where you got Whitehair, you got Daniels, and you got Long on the other side. I think he's still playing right guard. That interior three is going to be one of the best interior threes in football, which for a zone run game is massively impactful. So I look at Jordan Howard, and when Jordan Howard has good lanes in front of him, when he has just really defined creases that he can hit as a zone runner, he is outstanding, just outstanding as a runner. He has power. He has great vision. Not the greatest long speed in the world, but man, for all the inside zone they're going to be running, he is going to be an absolute nightmare to deal with on the ground. Tarik Cohen's going to get a lot of catches. I understand that. But just in terms of getting touchdowns and short yardage work and just kind of being the workhorse for this team, I love Howard this year. Thanks to James Daniels. That was a great draft pick. Right after him, I got Joe Mixon. Again, similar kind of thing. The Bengals drafted Billy Price in the first round, which was a huge upgrade at center for them. Center was a massive problem for this team last year, both in the pass game and the run game. I think Billy Price was one of the best centers in this draft class. So that was a great pick for them. Obviously, they also got Cordy Glenn. So overall, this offensive line is looking a lot better. And Mixon on tape, he showed flashes of being a brilliant running back talent. He just never really had lanes to run through. So I'm hopeful with the additions they made to the offensive line, he's finally going to get some more room to work, and we're going to see him breaking off a lot more big runs. So I think Mixon is kind of a buy low candidate right now. I think it's very possible he finishes like in the top 7 or 8 running backs for the season. Because he's such a versatile runner, he can kind of do a little bit of everything. So as long as he stays healthy, as long as the offensive line stays healthy, keep an eye on him to be a huge riser throughout the preseason. I'm still taking him in the second round for now just because there's a lot more guarantees ahead of him. But, man, the talent is there for him to finish at a huge value for anybody that's taken him in the second round. And then right after him, I got somebody who, maybe is going way higher than Mixon in most drafts, which is Kareem Hunt, who had a lot better of a situation. And now going into 2018, their roles are kind of reversed here, because Hunt had a lot better quarterback. He had a lot better receiving options around him. He had a better offensive line, better play caller. Just overall, the situation for Hunt last year was way better than Mixon. So, that's kind of why he led all rookies in rushing, was just because the situation around him was great. And like I said, I think the roles are kind of reversed this year. I think Kareem Hunt's situation is worse than Joe Mixon's. I think, with the additions to the Cincy offensive line, you still got AJ Green there, you still got Andy Dalton there, who I think is a fine quarterback, maybe not as good as Alex Smith was playing last year. I think Alex Smith was having a phenomenal year last year, whereas Dalton did not. But I think the talent is kind of in favor of Joe Mixon now, mainly because we don't really know if Pat Mahomes is a better quarterback than Andy Dalton. He had a really good start last year in his one start as a rookie, but the sample size isn't really there for us to project a full 2018 season off of that yet. And my grade coming out for Pat Mahomes when he was coming out of Texas Tech was a lot lower than most of the rookie quarterbacks last year. And granted, yes, I did underestimate Deshaun Watson. I underestimated Mitch Trubisky. I obviously overestimated Deshaun Kaiser by a fair margin. We don't really know how much was that because of Hugh Jackson, but clearly Kaiser was not ready, at least as ready as I thought he was after the preseason. But overall, all of those guys I had graded higher than Mahomes coming out for perfectly valid reasons on tape when you look at him back at Texas Tech. And we don't know yet if he's ironed out all of the flaws, the very clear flaws he had on tape in college. Again, his one start was encouraging, but you can't really project the entire Chiefs offense suddenly becoming better in 2018 off of that one start. So my logic here is that, Kareem Hunt is a good running back. He's not as talented as any of the other running backs in the second round that I have. And his situation is way up in the air in terms of we don't know if it's better or not. It could be a lot worse. People are saying that Mahomes, putting the gold jacket on him right now. People are the whole offseason saying Mahomes is a huge upgrade over Alex Smith. Alex Smith was playing at a freaking MVP level last year before, the end of the season when they kind of melted down. Like, how are you an upgrade over an MVP candidate, a legitimate MVP candidate for like 75% of the season? And we're just assuming that Pat Mahomes, who had a lot more flaws than every other rookie quarterback that was drafted highly last year, we're assuming that somebody with that many flaws is going to outperform a legitimate MVP candidate and take this offense to the next level. I'm not ready to buy that yet. So if he comes out and he looks great, awesome. That'll inflate the value of every other Chiefs offensive player. But because of that, because we don't know what we're getting yet, and we cannot possibly project what we're getting yet off of one game last year, I got to drop everybody down. I got to drop Kareem Hunt. I got to drop Sammy Watkins. I got to drop Tyreek Hill. I got to drop Travis Kelce. Because I'm not willing to bet on all of these unknown factors with a new play caller and a new quarterback who we've barely seen when I've got all these guys ahead of him that are either safer situations or just safer bets because we're more familiar with the situations around them. I'm not just going to throw Kareem Hunt in the first round just because of last year's production. I refuse to do that because football is a lot more complicated than that. We've seen a lot of backs like Hunt who have burst on the scene as a rookie when they have a great team around them, and then the team gets worse in their second and third year and their production drops like a rock. We've seen that happen a lot before, and I'm not saying it's going to happen to Hunt. I mean, I still have him as a second-round pick for a reason. He's a good running back, but I'm not willing to just buy this line that Mahomes coming in instantly improves the situation. If we see it in training camp, if we see it in preseason, I'm willing to bump everybody back up. But for now, in these initial rankings, I'm playing it safe until we actually know what Pat Mahomes is. So until then, that's where he's staying. Now, moving on to round 3, I've got Derrick Henry, Ajayi, and Christian McCaffrey all in round 3 for different reasons. I did a whole film room episode on Derrick Henry, so that one kind of speaks for itself. I'm way higher on him than a lot of people are. In fact, you could argue that he should be in the second round as well. But just because we're not entirely sure yet what everything's going to look like, I don't want to have a double standard here where we project everything getting better magically for the Titans, but not better for the Chiefs. So I'm not going to have a double standard here, and I will leave Henry at the top of the third instead of the bottom of the second. Now, that being said, moving on to Ajayi, last year I had him as a top 5 running back. And that didn't work out because, unfortunately, the offensive line in Miami kind of crapped the bed. And when I did break down Ajayi last year, I was half right and half wrong. Most of that episode I spent talking about how he was very dependent on good center play to be productive and how everything for his production was going to be reliant on Pouncey staying healthy. And ironically, Pouncey stayed healthy, but then he just didn't play well. So he had really terrible center play in front of him. His production was likewise terrible. Gets traded to Philadelphia, where they've got a great center in Jason Kelce, and his yards per carry goes up by like 2 or 3 yards. Like, his efficiency skyrocketed once he went to Philly because he's the kind of runner that is very, very dependent on good interior offensive line play, particularly at the center position. So I do think that he could have a big year in the third round. At least, vastly outperform that valuation of him. He could perform like a first-round running back. He can put up those kind of numbers, especially with Blunt gone now. But, I do acknowledge that he's not a special talent. He's kind of reliant on the offensive line in front of him, and if they sustain any major injuries up front in Philadelphia, whether it be Kelce or Brandon Brooks, God forbid, I love Brandon Brooks. He's a great guard as well. If they start sustaining injuries up front in Philadelphia, that will cause Ajayi's production to plummet because he's not talented enough to make up for it. So, when you're drafting Ajayi, you're really drafting the Philly offensive line. Just keep that in mind. And it was the same way in Miami. When you're drafting Ajayi, you are drafting his offensive line. If you believe in the Philly offensive line, if you think they're going to stay healthy, great. He's going to be monstrously productive for you. If you're a little bit concerned, and you don't want to deal with a running back who is entirely reliant on the rest of the team around him being good to be productive, then, take somebody else. That's my spiel on that. So, moving on to that, we got Christian McCaffrey, who, again, I also just broke down. This is PPR rankings, so in round 3, the reason why he's this high is, like I said in that episode, I think he's going to get 95 to 100 catches this year, if not more. And they should give him that many catches because anything less than 6 to 7 catches a game is underutilizing him. I think he's going to be the most effective receiving back in the league. I think you can lock him in for anything between like 12 to 14 points a week minimum in a PPR, just with how many catches I think he's going to get, how many yards through the air I think he's going to get, plus whatever he gets on the ground. I mean, he's going to be the guy that you draft to be your consistent anchor at the RB2 spot in a PPR league. Will he put up those huge 30-point games that you might get from some of the other bigger names? Probably not. I mean, unless he just has like a huge day with touchdowns and a huge day through the air. Probably not. But if you just want somebody who has an extremely high floor, who you know every single week is going to get you double-digit points and just be reliable, that's Christian McCaffrey. So when I'm getting my 2 running backs in the first 3 rounds, which most of the time I'm probably going to end up with 2 running backs in the first 3 rounds, I'm looking at guys like Le'Veon Bell, Todd Gurley, Zeke Elliott, David Johnson, as that big 4, as the slam dunk RB1 that can go off and can get me those 30-point games. And then I pray to God that Christian McCaffrey's there at the end of the 3rd, and that's my first 2 running backs. Whether I get another one in round 2, it depends on the valuations. Maybe I pick up Devonta Adams or Michael Thomas as my wide receiver 1. Who knows? Wide receiver or the second round's kind of a free for all, just because there's a lot of really good values there. But rounds 1 and rounds 3, that's kind of the bookend I'm looking for. Is you want that stud RB1 early, and then you hope for Christian McCaffrey as your rock, your anchor, late in the 3rd round. So that's what I think about that. Round 4 is kind of the upside round. These are a lot of the guys that I'm taking early just to make sure they're on my team as my RB3. All of these guys are, at least on my board, they're valued higher than basically everywhere else because I want them on my team. Kenyan, Drake, Marlon, Mack, Kerryon Johnson, Rashaad Penny, Tarik Cohen. I mean, most of the time you're going to be able to get them in rounds 5 or 6, but I really don't want to risk it because I'm super high on all of them. Drake, I think, is the best back in Miami, and if you give him 300 touches, people are questioning if he can handle 300 touches, but if you give him 300 touches, I think he's going to have a huge year and can finish as one of the top 10 running backs in the league, fantasy-wise, especially in a PPR. He can do a little bit of everything for them. Just phenomenally gifted zone runner, and I think he's going to be just round 4 might even be a little bit late for him. I wouldn't be totally opposed to taking him in the end of round 3 if Christian McCaffrey's already off the board. That's how much I like him in this system. Marlon Mack, same kind of thing. Drafting Quentin Nelson massively boosted Mack's value to me. Like, just massively. I think whether or not Luck's healthy, whether or not he's throwing, that's going to impact T.Y. Hilton a lot. It's going to impact basically the whole Colts receiving core, all their tight ends, kind of stuff like that. But with that offensive line and how good that offensive line is on paper, I think Mack is going to be productive no matter what. And, he's probably the only Colt on the roster that is Luck-proof, meaning Andrew Luck-proof. Whatever his status is, whether he's throwing the ball or not, Mack is going to get yards because when Quentin Nelson and Ryan Kelly are down blocking on you, you move the hell out of the way. Whoever they got playing right guard, I know they're talking about a couple names there. I like them both, whatever their options are. I think no matter what, that right guard spot's going to be good. And when you got a down blocker like Quentin Nelson that can move bodies out of the way, that widens the lane for those pulling guards, which means the linebackers can't just stack and shed into the lane. Like, they got to play the outside half of that man because it's too wide for them to handle by themselves, which puts so much freaking stress on the Mike and the Sam, or, if they're running weak side, it's the Will. It puts so much stress on them to fill their run lanes. And I don't think that people are going to be able to do it that well against this Indy offensive line. People don't realize how freaking good they are on paper. They got, I think, 3 first-round picks in that offensive line, and then another guy in Jack Mewhort who probably should have been a first-round pick. I thought he was a first-round talent at guard. Unfortunately, he's had some injury issues in his career, but if he stays healthy and if they have him at right guard, I think that is, just like the Bears, that is a hugely, hugely beneficial front 3 for Mack to work with. Just maybe not in a zone scheme, but in the power scheme that I expect them to run. I mean, they are going to move people. And the lanes are going to be too wide for backers to cover by themselves, which means they're not going to be able to come downhill, stack, shed, get off blocks. Like, they have to play half a man and just hope that everybody else is coming in to fill inside of them. And when you got to hope that your safeties are coming downhill and you got to hope that your Mike backers defeating blocks in the second level, that's where run fits fail. That's where lanes open up. And I think Mack has the speed and the power and the agility to take advantage of that. And I can't wait to see this Indy offensive line at work because they are going to rock people. Trust me, they are going to rock people. In a similar vein, I think Kerryon Johnson is being underdrafted right now. He's going in the 5th or 6th round in a lot of drafts, sometimes later. sometimes later because people aren't really sure what LeGarrette Blount's role going to be. I think by the end of training camp and especially by the end of preseason, Kerryon Johnson's going to be the guy. I like his situation a lot. I would not be surprised if he becomes this year's Kareem Hunt. We talked earlier about how Kareem Hunt's situation led him to being more productive than maybe more talented backs. And I think Kerryon Johnson, when you look at him, he has a great situation around him with a better quarterback than Hunt had, a better offensive line than Hunt had, possibly a better receiving core than Hunt had, if you like Marvin Jones and Golden Tate that much. So I think overall the situation in Detroit is they're going to have a top 7 to 8 offense, which is going to benefit Kerryon Johnson. And here's the thing. Kerryon Johnson, I have him graded higher coming out of college than I had Kareem Hunt. I think he's more talented than Hunt in almost every way, except maybe long speed. I think Hunt has better wheels than people expect. But I think Kerryon Johnson is how do I say this without way overhyping him? His running style is a mix of Le'Veon Bell and David Johnson. And don't freak out. I know that sounds like I'm putting the gold jacket on him right now. But vision-wise, he kind of does that stutter behind the line waiting for seams to open up, just like Le'Veon Bell does. And I know it drives running back coaches crazy, but he's so freaking talented, and he really sees holes well that he makes it work. And he's one of the few running backs, other than maybe Joe Mixon, that I think can get away with that. And, of course, Le'Veon Bell. But they're all freakishly talented guys. They can get away with it. But maybe unlike Le'Veon Bell and unlike Joe Mixon, his jump cut is better than both of them. And they both have really good jump cuts. He's got a 41-inch vertical, I think, like that, which is what shows up on tape when he jump cuts. He has that David Johnson jump cut that when he sinks his hips and explodes backside, if he reads that nothing's going to open front side and he's trying to explode backside, he's one of the few backs in the league that can actually get there on a jump cut. He is ultra explosive when he's shifting from gap to gap in a gap scheme, which they're going to run in Detroit next year. It is really freaky to watch because he has that patience like Le'Veon Bell, where he's waiting and waiting and waiting for it to open front side. But with that jump cut, he doesn't get into trouble like Bell does sometimes, where if it doesn't open, he can actually jump cut in one step and get backside where it's open. It's insane. And I wish he had a better offensive line at Auburn. He had some guys, he had Braden Smith and stuff like that. But, now when you look at Detroit's offensive line, this is the best line, relatively, that he's ever had. And I love the Frank Ragnow pick in the first round. They got him playing at guard, kind of like the Bears have James Daniel playing at guard. And those were 2 picks in the NFC North that are super underrated because I think Ragnow, just like Quentin Nelson, is a people mover. And when you're running this gap scheme, you want somebody who can take a 3-tech and just dig him out and move him out of the way and give Kerryon something to read front side. So I love that Ragnow pick. I think it pairs very well with Kerryon's run style. Decker's coming back. He's healthy. The right guard, right tackle, they're back. So they got another year of chemistry with him. Like, overall, on paper, I really like the Detroit offensive line. I love the quarterback. I love the receiving talent. I love the play caller. This is a better situation than Kareem Hunt had, and he's a more talented back than Kareem Hunt. So, to me, I'm going to have him on every single one of my teams because I think he's going to be a superstar. I truly believe that. He is going to be a superstar. And you can get him in the 4th now, but by the end of the preseason, you might not be able to. I know that sounds weird to say, but he might rocket up that far once people see him running behind this line. It's going to be something scary. I truly believe that. But anyway, moving on beyond that, let's go to round 5, where I kind of got more rookies. I got Freeman, I got Guice, I got some unknowns like Lamar Miller because we don't know about Deontay Foreman and his status. Miller, I think he's consistent. He's not flashy. If Foreman's Achilles is healthy, he's probably going to get a starting job taken away from him. So, to be honest, I only have him in the 5th round until I see what Foreman looks like in the preseason. If I like what I see from Foreman, Miller's going to drop like a rock. Foreman's going to go up. But we haven't seen him yet, so we don't really know. I'm just kind of sticking with this for now. Freeman, I think, is going to end up being the lead back in Denver. I comped him to Jordan Howard coming out of Oregon. I think he's a really talented runner. Maybe not elite long speed, but I like his vision, like his power, like his one-cut ability. So he's a really good fit in Denver. Guice, I think, is a good fit in Washington. Maybe not the greatest lateral agility compared to some of these other backs, but he's got phenomenal power and phenomenal straight line speed. So he really just needs one lane. He needs one lane and he'll be productive. Like, he just needs that one pull to connect, just to spring him outside and have him beat an angle from a safety, and he's gone. He's that kind of back. So he might be more feast or famine than some of the others, but when he feasts, he's going to feast. I can tell you that much. That's where a lot of his value comes from. Aaron Jones, way, way higher than most people have him. I got him in the 5th. Most people are taking him in like the 7th or the 8th after his suspension. I don't really care that he's suspended because to me, fantasy football is more than 2 weeks. And I think he is easily the most talented back and the most complete back in that backfield. So from week 3 on, he's going to be every week an RB3 for you that's going to produce like an RB2. So 5th round is not too high for me because I know what I'm getting with him. I know he's the best back there. Jamal Williams is not that talented. He doesn't scare me. He's more of a plotter in space, not a good receiving talent. Ty Montgomery, he's a role player. Again, Jones is more complete. You can use him in short yardage. You can use him in early downs. You can use him in passing downs. Aaron Rodgers loves him. He has good chemistry with him. So I'm not worried about the situation at all. Aaron Jones is the guy to own. And if he misses 2 weeks, he misses 2 weeks. I don't really care. I honestly don't really care. He's going to be there in the playoffs, and that's what matters. Take Aaron Jones. Don't think twice about it. And then we got Tevin Coleman, who's the league's greatest handcuff for 3 years running now. Don't really have to explain much on that. If Freeman goes down for any period of time, for any injuries, like I said, I was a little bit worried about that earlier. If Freeman goes down, Tevin Coleman is immediately an RB1 that will put up huge numbers, like he always does. Again, don't need to go too much into that. LeSean McCoy, that one's a little bit tough. I had him as a late 3rd round pick before the allegations came out. We don't know what's going to happen with that as of the time of me recording this. I put out a tweet on Twitter that says to just wait because I learned from the Reuben Foster situation. I jumped to conclusions with that one, and that burned me. It burned everybody. Most importantly, it burned Reuben, and I felt awful about that for him to have to go through that. And Gary and Conley just went through the same thing in Oakland as well. So we don't know what's going on. We don't know at this time what's going to happen. The only thing we do know is that whether or not charges get filed, whether or not he's guilty in a criminal court of law, that doesn't mean he won't get suspended. We've seen the league suspend people before just for not cooperating. So, unfortunately, he's subject to 2 different courts here. There's the court of criminal law and there's the court of the NFL, and we don't know if he's going to be suspended or not. We don't know if he's guilty or not, and unfortunately, we don't know if him being guilty or not even impacts if he'll be suspended. And it sucks because, I feel like we kind of have to rush to judgment on this. But unfortunately in fantasy, with everything playing out so early and this probably taking well into the season to be done with, it's just a matter of whether or not you want to take the risk. Whether he's guilty or not, it doesn't even matter. It's whether or not you want to take the risk that the league is not going to suspend him anyway or put him on the exempt list anyway. I probably won't take him at all because I can't trust him to not get suspended. Again, whether he's guilty or not, I'm not saying he's guilty, but I can't trust the situation that he's not going to get suspended or put on the exempt list. So I probably won't take him. And if this gets cleared up before you draft, great. He's a good 3rd round pick, but we just don't know. It's unfortunate, but we don't know. Now, moving on beyond that to round 6, we've got a bunch of role players. We've got some guys that are probably handcuffs, but high upside handcuffs, and then we have maybe some unknowns. I have Duke Johnson as the highest rated Browns running back because he's the only one that I think has a defined role right now. I think you can lock him in for 3rd down work pretty much no matter who's getting early down work between Chubb and Hyde or Hyde and Chubb. Whoever's getting the early down work, I don't think it matters. I think all the 3rd downs, Duke is going to be in the game. If they want to throw to a running back, Duke's going to be in the game. Like he's at least in a PPR league, he has value just because of that. Because he's going to be their 3rd down back. They're paying him a lot to be their 3rd down back. So I'm comfortable with taking him here just because I know what he's going to be. Beyond that, Mark Ingram, again, I know what he's going to be. And he's not this low because of the suspension. He's this low because Kamara is a freaking stud who's probably going to take over the lead back role this year, especially in those first 4 weeks when we can kind of see how the offense performs without Ingram there. But I think Ingram does still have value as a kind of touchdown vulture, to be honest, and he's going to get carries to spell Kamara. So especially in the fourth quarter, if they're up big on teams, they're probably going to go to Ingram to close people out instead of Kamara. So he's got value there. And because he's going to get goal line work, he's got value there. They do throw him screens. He's not a featured receiver, but they will throw him screens. So he's got some value there as well. I think as a flex play, after he comes off suspension, you could do a lot worse than Mark Ingram. Alvin Kamara is a better player, yes. But, last year they made it work, and both of them were startable every week. And I think it's going to be the same way. Kamara is going to get more of the production because he's going to get more of the touches, but that doesn't mean that Ingram is not startable. So just keep that in mind. He's probably a decent value in the 6th round. Alex Collins I'm a lot lower on him than most other people. And it's quite frankly just because he's not that talented. He's got some tools. I think when he gets up to speed, he's got good speed. He's got good power, but he's not shifty whatsoever. If you get him behind the line before he gets going, he's not going to break any tackles. I think he's limited as a receiving option. Like he's just a dude to me. I mean, not saying he's a bad player, and he's going to get production, but he's not somebody I'm going to be relying on as my RB2 every week because, quite frankly, he's just not that talented. I would rather take a gamble on some guys that are going to get just as many touches as him, but have the talent to do more with those touches than I will with Alex Collins. So I know there's a lot of Alex Collins truthers out there, but I know somebody who's an average running back when I see one, and I just see an average running back. Again, not a bad thing. He'll get touches, he'll get production, but I'm not going to be drafting him in like the top 20 running backs. I won't. It's as simple as that. Now, anyway, moving on to Dion Lewis, another guy that people are maybe drafting sometimes a little bit higher than this because they expect him to be the lead back in Tennessee. I don't believe that at all. I think Henry's going to get at least 60% of the touches, and you bring in Lewis as a change of pace and maybe get more third down work as well. And because this is a PPR league that does prop up his value a little bit more, I think he's going to get a lot more catches than Henry, but I don't expect him to be the lead back. So he's a little bit lower for me than most other people. But, man, he's a hell of a handcuff, that's for sure. If Henry gets hurt, which he doesn't have an injury history, but if Henry gets hurt, Lewis, I think, is going to get a ton of work, and I think you could slot him in as an RB2 immediately. But, yeah, he is the backup. That's just how it is. He's the backup. He is the guy that you look to be your Tevin Coleman, where if you need a flex, you can throw him in, but you're probably not throwing him in as RB1 or RB2 unless the starter gets hurt. Now, Chris Thompson, I think, is somebody who could be an RB2 if it's a really good matchup. So if they're playing against a team that runs predominantly cover 3, where Alex Smith is going to throw a million balls to his running backs because that's one of the best ways to attack cover 3, you play Chris Thompson as your RB2 because he's probably going to get 15 to 20 points. All other weeks, he's probably more of a flex. Not a bad option for a flex because it's PPR, but most weeks he's probably going to be a flex. But in those golden matchups where they're playing against the right defense and they got the right game plan, he's probably going to win you some games, especially in a PPR, because he will catch a lot of balls for Alex Smith. And then beyond Chris Thompson, I got Ronald Jones, who's ranked lower here than maybe some of the other rookie running backs. Guice also was a guy I was lower on than most people. Most people are taking him in like the 3rd or 4th. I'm taking him in the 5th. Rojo is somebody who's going in the 5th for a lot of people, and I'm taking him in the 6th. Primarily because, especially in the first 3 weeks, I don't expect him to do anything with Jameis Winston out. I've seen enough Ryan Fitzpatrick to know that most people are just going to be stacking the box and daring Ryan to beat them, which means Jones probably won't have a ton of room to run with. So the first 3 weeks, I think he's totally useless. After that, for the next 10 weeks or whatever that you're playing in fantasy football, I think he's going to be really inconsistent, mainly because he won't be getting a lot of passing down work, which in PPR is kind of important. And B, his offensive line I'm not super stoked on. So you have a rookie running back who will be missing his quarterback for the first 3 weeks against a brutal schedule to start the year. He won't be getting passes because they have 3 other running backs on the roster that are probably better than him at that. And his offensive line isn't great. Can he put up a productive rookie year? I mean, he's talented. He could, but his situation, I think, is kind of similar to Mixon's last year. Mixon's, except way more talented, where I'm not super stoked on the offensive line. I'm not super stoked on the quarterback situation. I'm not super stoked on the schedule. So can he hit 1,000 yards? Maybe. Will he? Probably not. You can take him earlier if you want, but he probably won't be on most of my teams because he'll likely be gone long before I have him valued. Just saying. Now, moving on from Rojo into the 7th round, this is where I've got Carlos Hyde. Again, don't really know what his role is going to be, so I'm lower on him than most others because I think Nick Chubb is just as good as him as an early down back. I had a bigger grade than a lot of people on Nick Chubb. So, and plus Hyde has injury issues as well. So I'm lower on him than most. I'd rather have Duke if I want any of those Browns running backs early. And then I got Sony Michel. Similar thing. I'm lower on him fantasy-wise than most people because I don't like the situation. I don't know what his defined role is. And I've been burned so many times by the Pats backfield that I'm over it. I'm done getting burned by this backfield. If you want to take him in round 4, that's on you, but I can't promise he'll get used like a first-round running back. As much as they love him talent-wise, I need to see the Patriots consistently use their running backs before I bet on them. I'm done. I'm over it. I don't feel like dealing with it anymore. After that, again, Nick Chubb, 1 round later. This is earlier than most people have him because I think eventually he could probably take that early down work from Hyde, but you don't really know. So I just take Duke, sleep better at night. And then I got Crowell, who is he's another guy, kind of like Alex Collins. He's just a guy. You can get production out of him to maybe be a flex, but you're really just drafting him to be a flex. You're not drafting him to be an RB2, so please don't do that. And then I got Deontay Foreman, who could rocket up this board depending on how he looks in preseason. He's here tentatively until I see how the Achilles looks. Honestly, he could switch places with Lamar Miller in a month. We just got to see how he is. So keep an eye on that. And then after that, I mean, round 9, round 10, round 11, you're just filling out roster spots. C.J. Anderson, you're playing him just to hopefully get a touchdown in Carolina. Theo Riddick, you're playing him for the receptions in the PPR. Rex Burkhead, same thing. You're playing him for the receptions. Marshawn Lynch, I'm way low on him compared to most people. He's going in the 7th round in a lot of places. So he probably won't be on any of my teams because I got him in round 9. And then Ty Montgomery, again, he's a role player. So I'm not taking any of these guys to be a starter. They're just on my bench in an emergency situation. Round 10, Nyheim Hines, I think he's got a good shot to be productive in a PPR as the passing down back behind Marlon Mack, which you could argue maybe cuts into Mack's value a little bit in a PPR, but I think because of the offensive line in front of Mack, he's still going to be a monster. Definitely get a lot of touchdowns, I think. Kalen Ballage, I think similar kind of situation where he could cut into Kenyan Drake's value a little bit, another 4th round value that I have, particularly in short yardage. So it's kind of opposite where Hines can take receptions from Mack and Ballage can take touchdowns from Drake. So maybe limits both of their values a little bit, but you could do a lot worse handcuff-wise than Hines and Ballage. If either of those starters gets hurt, I think both of those are solid plays. Latavius Murray, again, he's a handcuff. You really only start him in case of emergency. Round 11, it's just a whole list of dudes that's filling out RB5 and RB6 on the depth chart. If you have to play any of them, you're probably in trouble. But I will say that Jordan Wilkins from the Colts, if Matt gets hurt, he actually might be a better play than Hines. A lot of people are going to be picking up Hines off the waiver wire if Matt gets hurt, but you should probably take Wilkins because I think he's a more complete back than Hines, and I think he's really underrated as a talent running between the tackles. And with that offensive line in front of Mack, I think Wilkins can maybe not match production, but certainly put up more pure rushing production than Hines. Hines will still take the passing down work no matter who's starting as a running back, but just file that one away as like a 15th or a 16th round pick, depending on how many rounds your draft goes, to handcuff Marlon Mack with Jordan Wilkins. Because if Mack gets hurt, Wilkins he's the guy that I think is going to come out of nowhere and put up some really, really big weeks for you in the event of injury. So just keep an eye on that one. And there's not really anybody else to talk about. I mean, Doug Martin, he's a flyer. You hope he's super talented. I still think he's a talented back. Probably more physically talented than Marshawn Lynch at this point in his career, but you can't trust him. I got burned by Doug last year, and unfortunately, a lot of you guys did too when you took my advice. But, as a round 11 plus flyer, you could do a lot worse than Doug. Jonathan Stewart, he's there just in case Barkley gets hurt. He's there just to farm touchdowns. That's it. Kenneth Dixon, he's somebody to keep an eye on if Alex Collins struggles, because Dixon's a more talented back, and I wouldn't completely rule out Dixon pushing him for the starting job if Collins struggles, but I'm not going to spend anything before like a 12th round pick on him. So don't go crazy with it. Sproles, I know he's retiring after this year, but he's still one of the best receiving backs in the league, which, consequently impacts Corey Clement's value. Clement's value really comes from if Ajayi gets hurt. So, again, it's a lot of handcuffs this late. It's a lot of guys that they're just filling out the depth chart as your 5th and 6th guy. You don't expect to play them. You hope you don't have to play them, but they still need to be on your roster. So don't get too excited about everybody that late in the rankings there. But overall, that's kind of where my head's at with my running back rankings. Clearly, there's a lot that can change in the next 5 weeks, depending on how training camp goes, depending on how, unfortunately, people are going to get hurt. We know they're going to get hurt. So depending on what happens there, and depending on what happens in the preseason, because a lot of these guys can go way up or way down depending on what they look like on tape, especially in Houston. That entire backfield situation can get turned on its head maybe 2 weeks into the preseason. So there's going to be a lot of updates to these rankings, and if you are a patron, you will see all of those updates. Unfortunately, I don't have time to do this kind of video every single week on the channel. But if you follow me on Patreon, if you have given literally any amount of money, even as low as $1 to the Patreon, you will get these updates every single week. So keep an eye out for those. I will be having more episodes like this for the receivers and the tight ends and the quarterbacks and maybe the defenses if I have time. I've got some other big projects I'm working on, but I do want to hit receivers, and I want to hit tight ends, and I want to hit quarterbacks before training camp starts. So keep an eye on the channel for that. And I got a link to the Patreon down in the description if you want to become a member and get all of these rankings in list format. If you drop a comment in any of those, if you want like an Excel doc that I built these off of, if you want the Excel doc, just drop a comment in any of the rankings that I posted with your email, and I'll email them to you. I have no problem doing that. And until then, hope you enjoyed this. Hope you enjoyed me kind of having a chat on camera for once about running backs, and I will be back soon doing the same thing for receivers. So until then, later.